The great green hands themselves have guided us here. You can join the Wog or get out of the way.
Humanity within the era Indomitus stands upon a knife's edge. Our enemies are countless and their heresies boundless. Yet for each faction that opposes his Imperium, there is a war leader at their helm. The most hated foes of humanity, these enemies must be crushed before his Imperium can ascend once more as the rulers of the galaxy. So today, we shall elucidate the greatest greenskin threat that humanity faces in the tumultuous 41st millennium. The Orc war boss, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka. Before his ascension as the overlord of the greenskin hordes, Ghazghkull began his toil on the backwater planet of Urk. Abundant with vast populations of orcs, the planet once known as Eurocleus within the Zornian system would bear proximity to strong warp storms. Rich in minerals, the planet would first be colonized by the Imperium during the Dark Age of technology. Drawn by its burgeoning infrastructure, the orcs would raise the bustling human colony to its foundations, and as the initial orc raiders would abandon the now pillaged planet, they would leave spores to lie dormant within its soil. Once more colonized by the Eldari, the planet would spill forth its orc spores, and once again, the cycle of destruction, abandonment, and rebuilding would begin. Reclaimed by the Dark Angel's Legion during the Great Crusade, Eurocleus would once again be mined for resources, and spaceports would be tethered to the planet's twin moons. Yet with the War of the Beast, an Orc war would sweep across the planet, and once more the spores of the orcs would grow upon its surface. The tides of the warp would twist and convulse, making travel to the Zornian system difficult, with the greenskins upon its surface stagnating and fighting amongst themselves on the desolate planet. Renamed Urk, the planet would be embroiled with never-ending slaughter by the orcs. Scavenging for scraps of human technologies left upon the broken hives and landscapes, the orc warbands would dwindle in might as leaders fell and scraps became more precious. Yet within this turmoil, the orc known as Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka would emerge. Monitoring the planet within the sector's watchposts, the Emperor's Dark Angels would observe the Orc planet for signs of an impending war within the system. During 932.M41, observations of an upstart greenskin of the Goth clan would be relayed to the chapter of the Lion. Thraka had led his small warband to assault a Space Marine command sanctum with the intent of pillaging the base's resources. Thraka would be shot by a bolter shell, pulverizing a portion of his cranium, and with its detonation, disintegrating and shredding chunks of his brain. Against such a crippling blow, Thraka would return to his feet and resume his charge. Holding bits of the remnants of his spilling brains within his hands, Thraka would be treated at the outpost of Rustspike by the infamous Orc pain boy, Mad Doc Grotznik. Successfully operating on the remains of Thraka's ruined brain, Ghazghkull would awaken with a renewed sense of clarity. His skull rebuilt with wires, sinews, rivets, a new bionic eye, and plates of adamantium, Ghazghkull would be bestowed a vision by his piggish gods. Thraka would see himself leading the greatest war in history with the blessing of Gork and Mork. Believing his providence as proof that he had been chosen, Thraka would present himself as the living embodiment of the will of Gork and Mork. Upon leaving Painboy Grotznik's tent, Thraka would be confronted by the Death Skull's warlord, Dregmek. Firing his combi bolter at the dazed yet walking Thraka, the detonations of his weapon would not harm Ghazghkull, despite the true aim of Dregmek. Thraka would pummel warlord Dregmek and end him with a headbutt of his newly plated skull. Declaring himself to be the living will of Gork and Mork, the orcs of the encampment would set upon the Goth usurper. With no more than a scratch of damage, Thraka would decimate the would-be attackers within the hour and claim Rustspike as its new ruler. The prophet of Gork and Mork had staked his claim, and soon his power would grow exponentially. Ghazghul would set upon the Orc warbands of Urk, defeating any whom would challenge his claim and incorporating the defeated clans into his ranks. As his reputation grew, Orcs would abandon their own clans unprompted and venture to Rustspike to join a clan that showed the promise of untold glories. As Rustspike exceeded its capabilities to contain the vast hordes of Orcs within, Fracka would lead his warband west to the Big Wasteland. Confronted by the Badmoons clan and their leader, war boss Snazdaka, Fracka's forces would be harried by moving skirmishes of overwhelming firepower and speed. Utilizing his own cunning to outmaneuver the Badmoons, Fracka would sabotage the Badmoon supply dumps used to refuel their battle wagons and burn their shantytowns to the ground. Using the smoke of the burning towns, Fracka would conceal his forces and strike once within reach of their prey. With the Badmoons conquered, Fracka would race the Evil Sun Grand Speed boss, Shazfrag, for control of his clan. Outracing the fastest Orc of Urk, Fracka would prove to the Orcs that none could defeat him in any field of war, tactics, or skill. Fashioning an immense power claw from the wreckages of the defeated Badmoons tanks, Fracka would now not only be an imposing warlord in his own right, but command the largest warband of Urk. Crushing any whom defied his rule, Fracka would soon unite every tribe and hold dominion of Urk. After 6 years of subjugation, Urk now stood united under the banner of Ghazghul. Ships would flock to the planet with tidings of the warlord of Urk passing amongst the stars. The various mechs of the clans would forge in unison, crafting battle fortresses, weapons, and engines of calamity never before seen. Driven by the words and visions of Fracka, the Greenskins' purpose had been elucidated and their destiny lay outstretched and ripe for the taking. The system's sun began to flicker. The Orcs would stand idle as they looked to the celestial body in shock. Yet Fracka would divine the sun's rays as a sign from Gork and Mork and demand that their time had come to leave Urk behind. Suddenly, tinted with a bright green light, Fracka's divinity would be laid bare for all to see. Within a week, the Orcs would compile their vast stockpiles of weapons and armaments, the warp would calm, and spill forth a vast space hulk into real space, which would slowly drift into Urk's orbit. The exodus of the War of Ghazghul had dawned and been paved with the patronage of Gork and Mork. Securing the space hulk, Fracka and his Orcs would cleanse the hulk of the denizens within, the demons of chaos. Dubbing the hulk as World Killer, the space hulk would be drawn back into the warp, and for untold days, weeks, perhaps even years within the time-mangled immaterium, the Orcs would explore their new abode. Salvaging lost technologies from within, the Orcs would once again create strange and potent contraptions. Yet despite many incursions of demonic entities, World Killer would once more be spat into real space from the roiling tides of the warp. During 941.M41, World Killer would emerge at the edge of an Imperium star system, the Armageddon Sector. Set for a collision course with the system's core planet, Fracka would unwittingly initiate the Second War for Armageddon. Crash landing on the planet's surface, the Imperium's orbital defenses would merely scrape and dent the vast space hulk as it plummeted into orbit. The world shook with the impact, its blast wave killing scores of the Orcs instantly, and the devastation wrought on the surface would be immense. Yet once again, Gork and Mork would smile upon the Greenskins, as their losses would be inconsequential compared to their total might. Assaulting Armageddon Prime, the inhabitants of the planet would be woefully underprepared for their surprise invasion. They now stood against the mightiest Orc war seen in history, which had descended from the skies without warning and seemingly from nowhere. The War of Ghazghul would decimate the Imperium defenders. Millions of Orcs would cleave through the Astra Militarum regiments as desperate calls for aid would be transmit to any nearby Imperium forces. Thraka would conquer Hive Volcanus and subsequently every hive within Armageddon Prime. Setting their sights on Armageddon Secundus, the Orcs would march with the invigoration of conquest burning within them. Yet within this second bastion of humanity, Thraka would meet a foe whom would prove to be his ultimate nemesis, Commissar of the Armageddon Steel Legion, Sebastian Yarrick. Defending Hades' Hive, despite the failures and interference of the planetary governor, Hermann von Straub, Sebastian Yarrick would strike fear within the Orc ranks. Revered for his fighting skills and inadvertently bearing the same colors as the Goth clan, Commissar Yarrick would prove to be an indomitable foe to whom even Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka could not underestimate. Brandishing an Orc power claw upon his severed arm, Old Baelai would defend Hades' Hive with stubbornness and unyielding fury. As both Hades and Hellsreach Hive stood unbroken, Thraka would be forced to take to the field personally in order to break his enemies. Employing many cunning and brutal strategies, Thraka's tactics would succeed in breaching the walls of Hive Hellsreach, yet Hades would stand defiant. Outmaneuvered at every turn by Yarrick, the Commissar would buy the Hive time until reinforcements could arrive to the system. With the arrival of the Blood Angels, Ultramarines and Salamander's chapters to Armageddon, Thraka would be driven back. Stubbornly ignoring the reinforcements in order to decimate Hades' Hive, Thraka's obsession to best Yarrick would prove the downfall of his campaign. Ghazghkull would seemingly disappear, with some greenskins claiming him to be personally rescued by the hands of Gork and Mork. Whatever the cause of his withdrawal, Thraka's war would retreat, and so the second war for Armageddon would be won in the name of the Emperor. Yet Ghazghkull would not relent in his quest to claim the once homeworld of Ulanor from the grasp of the Imperium, for this would not be the last time the Prophet of Gork and Mork would attempt to seize Armageddon. Despite the efforts of Sebastian Yarrick to hunt down and slay Ghazghkull, the Prophet of Gork and Mork would rebuild his war, starting within the Golgotha subsector. Subjugating the Orc warbands within the Greenskin-held system, Thraka would once again amass a war of incredible power with immense speed. Yet humanity would not stand idle as Thraka would amass his forces. Yarrick, in his attempt to hunt down and slay Ghazghkull, would be captured and tormented amongst the slaves taken by the Orcs. Releasing Yarrick after observing his defiant attempt to escape the Space Hulk, Thraka would warn Yarrick that soon the War of Ghazghkull would once again assault Armageddon, and Thraka wanted them to be ready. Raiding Imperium strongholds across the Ultima Segmentum, Ghazghkull would experiment with his technologies and prevent his war from growing too strong. Limiting his potentially gargantuan army, Thraka would instead train his lieutenants in order to improve their already vast experience. Yet 75 years after his initial invasion, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka would initiate the Third War for Armageddon. Destroying Hades' Hive, the symbol of his prior defeat, the War of Ghazghkull would then seek to blunt the defenders of Hive's Tempestora, Tartarus, and Armageddon. Utilizing asteroid bombardments, teleporting technologies, and overwhelming force, Ghazghkull would once again come close to destroying the bastion of the Imperium. Billions on both sides of the war would perish, and Orc fighting would spread throughout the sector. Yet Thraka would eventually be pushed back from the sector. Ghazghkull had been forewarned by his patron gods that a greater war would soon be on the horizon. Armageddon had simply been a staging ground, a test for their prophet to hone his tactics, knowledge, and experience to better grow his understanding of how to cripple humanity. Giving in to his impending vision as the war energies within his skull seemed close to bursting, Thraka would envision the final Great War. Every Orc of the galaxy united in their final clash against existence and their gambit to destroy everything that would oppose them. Ragnarok, the great Orc apocalypse, would soon be at hand and bring forth the manifestations of Gork and Mork into the material universe. Assembling a vast fleet, Fracka would venture to the Octarius sector to further train his Wa in vast, brutal conflicts against the Tyranid menace, High Fleet Leviathan. Octaria would be bathed in the blood of the Tyranid Xenos, as Fracka's Wa would aid the Octarian Orcs, currently deadlocked in the conflict. Taking to the field personally, Fracka would engage the Tyranids and lead the Orcs in their endless battle. With the Orcs emboldened, Fracka would leave the Octarius warzone to enable further Orc warfare to spill across the galaxy. Leading his fleet comprised of over 5 million warships, not even his beheading by the Space Wolf Ragnar Blackmane would be enough to end his rampage. Thanks to the aid of Mad Dog Grotznik, Ghazghkul's head would be attached to an even mightier body as he leads his final great Wa to their ultimate goal. With the Orc Xenos frenzied across several theaters of war across the galaxy, Ragnarok draws close with Fracka as the herald of the death knell of every empire. The Orcs are once again mustered to conquer the galaxy. And this time, more than any time in humanity's history, all hope to prevent their conquest is dangerously scarce.
It's Warlord Ghazghkul Mag Uruk Thraka, and I speak with the word of the gods. I'm the prophet of the Wag, and whole worlds burn in my bootprints.
This has been a tale of the Greenskin Hordes, read by the Remembrancer. Ghazghkul Mag Uruk Fracka is one of the greatest threats to all life in the galaxy. For even should he win, all that shall remain will be torn asunder. Yet humanity shall not let such an ignominious end befall existence, and we shall stand defiant until the bitter end, or the death of the prophet of such heathen gods.